I was packing sunscreen at my kitchen table when Carla slid the itinerary across to me. I'd spent $30, $1,000, so the whole family could see Hawaii together. My name wasn't on the flights. She smiled and said, "I forgot to buy you a ticket. Go home." The sting was quiet, but it went deep. That night I called my lawyer and we found a consent form with my signature forged. Tomorrow, they've called a family meeting. I'm walking in with proof, and a text from my granddaughter that could end this. Stay with me to the end, and tell me what city you're watching from. Spring light slanted through the blinds in the kitchen, warm and golden, touching the worn oak table where I had spread out old photo albums just that morning. The hum of the refrigerator and the faint chirping from the yard filled the silence. For a long while, I sat there in that stillness, letting myself think about what I had done. $30,000. My savings, scraped together after decades of careful living, now poured into a single promise: a family trip to Hawaii. It wasn't extravagance that moved me, but something deeper. For years I had been the quiet figure at the end of the table, the one whose chair was easy to forget when birthdays rolled around or when Christmas dinners became about everyone else's plans. This trip was my way of carving my name back into the family story. I wanted them to remember me as more than the man who shuffled between doctor's appointments and empty evenings. I wanted them to see me as the father who gave them joy, not the burden they sometimes treated me as. Carla, my daughter, had always been the bright one, sharp, ambitious, with a way of walking into a room as though she owned it. I used to see so much of her mother in her, until the warmth hardened into something less forgiving. Her husband, Mitchell, kept his words short and his eyes down when family matters came up. Then there were the two bright spots, Sylvie and Jonas, my grandkids, whose laughter softened even the hardest corners of my house. I held on to their innocence the way a man adrift clings to driftwood. When Carla came over that afternoon, her heels clicked against the tile like a metronome of control. She set down her bag, slipped out papers, receipts, and a thick folder of bookings. My kitchen suddenly looked less like a place for family and more like an office. She spread them before me with a smile that was polished, efficient. Here we are, Dad, flights, hotels, car rentals, all taken care of. I leaned forward, scanning the pages. At first, pride swelled. This was real. The vacation was happening. Then something caught my eye. Every reservation, every line of print had her name, Mitchell's name, even the children's, not mine. I smoothed the paper with my hand, trying to mask the prick of unease rising in my chest. "Looks good," I said, forcing a smile that felt more brittle than sincere. Across the table, Ruth, Mitchell's mother, sat quietly with her tea. She didn't speak, didn't interfere, just watched with a face that gave nothing away. Later, when Carla stepped into the hallway to take a call, I found the moment to ask, "Why isn't my name anywhere here? The flights, the hotel, nothing lists me." She laughed lightly, as though I had asked about the weather. "Dad, don't worry. I've got everything under control. It's just simpler this way." Mitchell's silent nod behind her sealed the matter, his agreement more eloquent than words. Inside, something twisted. It wasn't just this moment. I had felt it before, when Christmas dinner plans shifted without asking me, when birthdays came and I was left with a polite invitation after everything had been decided, when even my medical appointments were arranged as if I were a child who couldn't read his own prescriptions. This vacation, meant to be my gift, my legacy, now felt like another scene in the same play, me cast as a guest in my own life. Still, I swallowed my protest, the way I had learned to do for years. As Carla gathered the folder back into her bag, she tossed me a casual instruction. "Just pack light, Dad. We'll handle the rest." Pack light. The words echoed, shrinking me into the margins. But then, Sylvie slipped up to my side. In her small hand was a drawing, the ocean sketched in blue crayon with a stick figure standing at the shore. "This is us, Grandpa," she whispered. "I can't wait to swim with you." Her faith was the ember that kept me warm, even as doubt spread. I folded the drawing carefully, as if it were more valuable than any receipt Carla carried. When the house quieted and I picked up the printed itinerary once more, my stomach turned cold, line by line, page by page. I searched for myself. My name wasn't there, not on the flight, not on the hotel, nowhere. The itinerary lay flat on the kitchen table, its glossy print mocking every sacrifice made. My eyes scanned each page again and again, desperate to find my name. It wasn't there. No mention of Jerome Skakel. Carla breezed in like a spring gust, cheeks glowing as if nothing was amiss. "We're all set, Dad," she said, her voice cheerful, almost rehearsed. The smile she wore stretched too wide, too smooth. Nodding, lips curved in a weak imitation of agreement, but inside a chill spread. Maybe it was a mistake, a clerical error. Maybe. Yet the certainty in her eyes whispered otherwise. Later that evening, while watering the hibiscus by the fence, Earl Karras ambled over, his straw hat tilted back. He leaned on the gate like he'd done for 30 years. "Jerome," he began, voice low. "I overheard your Carla at the mailbox earlier. She said, 'Dad won't even notice what's missing.'" The words landed like stones in my gut. Earl's face carried a shadow of concern. "You might want to double-check things, old friend, just to be safe." A weak laugh escaped, more out of pride than belief. "Earl, you know Carla. She wouldn't—" But even as I said it, doubt gnawed. Earl's warning lingered after he tipped his hat and walked back across the lawn. I stood with the hose dripping, ashamed at the thought of suspecting my own daughter. 2 nights later, I joined them for dinner at Carla's home. Mitchell poured wine with his usual silence, the clink of glass filling spaces his words never did. Carla beamed at the kids, her hand resting proudly on Mitchell's arm. Jonas leaned forward, excitement bubbling. "I can't wait to surf in Hawaii." "Grandpa," before warmth could spread, Sylvie chimed in, voice sweet and innocent. "But Mommy said Grandpa doesn't like beaches." The fork slipped from my hand. Carla's laugh shot through the air, sharp and quick. "Oh, honey, you misunderstood. Grandpa loves the ocean." Her eyes darted to mine, daring me to question. The laughter faded, but the stone in my chest did not. That slip, unguarded, unpolished, spoke louder than her denial. Driving home, the night pressed heavy. Images replayed, Carla's laughter masking decisions, birthdays she controlled, medical appointments where my say was brushed aside. The smile, always the smile, standing in for authority. And Mitchell, never meeting my gaze, complicit in silence. Back in the quiet of my La Jolla home, I sat with Sylvie's drawing from days earlier, waves and bright colors. Her tiny handwriting scrawled, "Swim with me, Grandpa." The paper trembled in my hands, an anchor and a wound all at once. The phone buzzed on the counter, an airline notification. Fingers stiff, I opened it. There, in black and white, the family booking spread across the screen. Carla Rader, Mitchell Bianchi, Sylvie, Jonas, but no Jerome. Paid for with my savings, planned in my house, celebrated at my table, without me. There it was in black and white, my family's vacation, paid for by me, without me. The glow of my phone lit up the kitchen table. I'd been staring at the airline email for half an hour, scrolling back and forth, searching for the clerical error that would explain why my name wasn't on the passenger list. My heart wanted to believe it was just a glitch, a missing field in some database. But the more I read, the colder the truth felt. Carla had insisted we get together again the next evening, and I told myself maybe that would clear things up. Maybe I'd catch a laugh, a slip of the tongue, something that would tell me all this suspicion was just the imagination of an old man too tired to see clearly. When Mitchell opened the door, he offered a polite handshake, his smile taut and perfunctory. Carla's expression, on the other hand, beamed bright, almost exaggerated. "We're so glad you came, Dad," she said, her voice pitched a little higher than usual. The warmth should have reassured me. Instead, it unsettled me more. The dinner table was set as if for company, not family, Wine glasses polished, napkins folded, the roast steaming at the center. I watched Carla laugh at Jonas's joke, her face glowing under the soft chandelier light. Yet the longer I observed, the more it looked like a performance. Her smile was too practiced, the same smile she'd used years ago when she told me she had everything under control with Mom's estate paperwork. The same smile she'd worn at Christmas when she insisted on changing our long-standing traditions. Sweet on the surface, sharp beneath. The children's chatter filled the silence I left. Jonas leaned forward, excitement spilling over about surfing in Hawaii. Sylvie, ever innocent, reached for a bread roll and murmured something about Grandpa not liking beaches. Carla quickly laughed, brushed her daughter's hair back, and explained. She misunderstood, but the stone had already dropped inside me, heavy and immovable. Midway through the meal, I slipped my phone from my pocket, pretending to check the time. A notification glared on the screen. Bank alert, withdrawal for travel expenses. The amount made my pulse jump. Thousands gone. From my account, I hadn't authorized a thing. My thumb trembled as I closed the message before anyone noticed, sliding the phone back as though it burned. For a moment, I couldn't hear the laughter around me, only the dull roar of blood rushing in my ears. When I returned to the conversation, Carla was lifting her glass. To family, she declared, her voice light, and to Dad, who made this trip possible. Mitchell raised his glass too, but his eyes darted away from mine. Quick, nervous. The kind of glance a man gives when he knows something he doesn't want to admit. I raised my glass as well, lips pressing into a faint smile. If this dinner was meant to reassure me, it only confirmed what I feared. It was a carefully staged act. I was being honored, but only in words, while something else was happening beneath the surface. The drive home cut through quiet streets, street lamps glowing against the pavement. My thoughts wandered back to decades of working double shifts, of holidays spent making sure my children never went without. It stung to realize how easily all of that could be reduced to numbers on a balance sheet and a smile at a dinner table. Sylvie's drawing lay folded in my coat pocket, a small, bright anchor in a sea of doubt. I pulled it out at a red light, smoothing the crumpled edges. Hope flickered faintly. Then my phone buzzed again. Another notification, another deduction, this one labeled guest accommodations. My throat tightened. There was no mistake. Not this time. This wasn't a clerical error. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. And I was the only one who hadn't been told. The morning sun poured through the blinds, but it did nothing to chase away the heaviness that sat in my chest. Coffee had always been a comfort, a steady companion across the years, but that morning it tasted bitter. Every sip carried the memory of the bank alerts, the deductions for a trip that was supposed to be my gift, now turning into my exclusion. The email replayed in my head like a cruel joke, the missing name on the itinerary staring back at me in black and white. Then the charges, guest accommodations, travel expenses, each one stabbing deeper. On the table beside my cup lay Sylvie's drawing of the ocean, her small hands having trusted me with her joy. That fragile hope steadied me enough to whisper to myself, I had to face her, no matter how much it broke me. I grabbed my keys and drove to Carla's house without calling ahead. The road blurred past as the steering wheel trembled under my grip. Every mile was a battle between dread and determination, and by the time I pulled into her driveway, my heart was pounding hard enough to make my breath uneven. Carla answered the door in her usual way, smile polished, hair perfectly styled, voice lilting with false warmth. Dad, what a surprise! I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, steadying my voice. We need to talk. Her brows flickered before she smoothed them with a practiced grace. Of course. Is this about the trip? Don't worry. I've got everything under control. Mitchell stood a few feet away, arms crossed, pretending to study his phone. He didn't lift his eyes once. My chest tightened. Carla, I said carefully, why isn't my name on the reservations? The flights, the hotel, not one of them has me listed. Her laugh came too quickly, too easy. Dad, it's just logistics. Paperwork. You'll be there with us. I promise. But her smile, the same one I'd seen her wear at school plays, PTA meetings, every time she wanted to cover something sharp with something sweet, made my stomach twist. My eyes drifted to the counter, where a folder lay open, in bold letters across the top. Family guests. While Carla turned to pour water into glasses, I leaned closer, just enough to glimpse the page. Names lined up neatly. Carla, Mitchell, Sylvie, Jonas, even Ruth. My name was nowhere. Heat rushed through me, and I clenched the edge of the counter to steady myself. My voice sharpened. Am I even supposed to be on this trip? Carla turned back, water sloshing slightly in the glass she carried. She chuckled, placing a hand on my arm. Of course you are, Dad. Don't be dramatic. You always overthink things. Her touch burned more than it soothed. Something in me pushed past the fog, past the decades of swallowing down words for the sake of peace. My eyes caught the hallway behind her. On the wall hung a whiteboard covered with colorful markers. Departure schedule, flight numbers, times, hotel check-ins. My gaze skimmed each line. Their names were there, clear and bold. Mine was absent again. The floor beneath me seemed to tilt. For the first time, I understood with chilling certainty. This was no clerical error. This was deliberate. I forced a breath through my teeth, drawing my face back into neutrality. I should go, I said, each word heavy. Forgot I had an appointment. Carla's smile froze for a split second before she pasted it back on. All right, Dad, we'll talk later. As I stepped out the door, the air cooler than before, I heard her whisper to Mitchell behind me, soft but sharp. He's starting to catch on. The words sliced deeper than any knife. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, rage and sorrow colliding like storm clouds. There was no longer room for doubt. This wasn't an oversight. It was a plan. Restless steps carried me from one end of the living room to the other. My hands clenched and unclenched at my sides. The whisper I had overheard in Carla's hallway, "He's starting to catch on," played over and over in my mind. It was more than a slip of the tongue. It was confirmation. The house felt too small, the air too heavy, every shadow mocking the silence I had kept for too long. I picked up the phone and dialed her number with a firmness I hadn't shown in years. She answered with a sing-song, "Hi, Dad," as though nothing had happened. I cut her off. "We need to talk. Tonight. No excuses." A pause stretched between us, and for the first time, her smile couldn't reach me through the line. She agreed, but her voice had lost its luster. The sun was sliding low when I arrived at Carla's house. The warm glow of the day felt at odds with the chill that greeted me inside. Mitchell leaned against the wall, arms crossed, silent but present like a guard dog. Carla sat across from me at the dining table, her face composed, her smile thin, practiced. I folded my arms and stared directly at her. Tell me the truth. Was I ever part of this trip? My words cut into the space between us, sharper than any knife. Carla laughed softly, too softly. Dad, it's just logistics. Don't get yourself worked up over details. She reached for a wine glass, as though the question were too trivial to deserve her attention. Mitchell shifted, but said nothing. I didn't blink. Don't brush me off, Carla. I saw the lists, the schedules. My name isn't anywhere. For a flicker of a second, the mask slipped. Her eyes hardened before the smile snapped back into place. You wouldn't enjoy Hawaii. You'd just slow everyone down. We thought it'd be kinder this way. The words landed with the weight of a hammer. My heart thudded against my ribs, but I forced my voice to remain steady. Kinder? I spent $30,000 on this trip. Money I saved for a memory we'd share as a family. You've treated me like a checkbook with legs. I'm not invisible. Not anymore. Carla's lips parted, but no words came. Mitchell stepped forward, his voice cold, clipped. You should be grateful we even thought of including you at all. The insult burned hotter than fire. I turned to face him fully, locking eyes with the man who had married my daughter but never once treated me as family. Grateful? My voice rose, breaking through the room's heavy silence. I raised her. I worked every day of my life to give her more than I ever had, and you stand there telling me I should be grateful for being erased? The tension snapped taut. Carla reached out, her hand trembling as it touched my sleeve. Dad, please don't. I shook her hand off gently but firmly. No more. If I'm not on that plane, then none of you will be. At least not with my money. The declaration cracked through the room like thunder. Mitchell's jaw tightened, his fists curling at his sides. Carla's face drained of color, her smile gone for once. Silence filled the space, heavier than any argument. Without waiting for their reply, I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. I walked out, each step fueled by a mixture of rage and clarity. At the door, I slammed it shut behind me, the sound echoing back at them. In the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had swallowed every slight, every dismissal. Tonight, I had finally spoken, not as the weak old man they believed I was, but as the father they had underestimated. They thought I would stay silent forever. They were wrong. The morning light felt different that day. Though it was the same sun rising over the same quiet street in San Diego, after a night of pacing, replaying every word I had hurled at Carla, there was no peace left in me. My chest was tight, my hands restless. Her whispered line, "He's starting to catch on," gnawed at my ears like a broken record, coffee in hand. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the stack of bank alerts. My name, erased from flights. My money bled out under someone else's pen. Silence had always been my way of keeping peace, but silence now was a coffin waiting to be nailed shut. Enough. I pulled out the worn leather-bound address book I'd kept for decades and found Malcolm Brandt's number, an old friend. My lawyer, the man who had guided me through estates, taxes, and every storm after my wife's passing. My voice trembled as I left the message, but it wasn't weakness. It was the sound of a man sharpening his resolve. By mid-morning, I was sitting in Malcolm's office. The place hadn't changed in 20 years, shelves lined with legal tomes, framed diplomas from Berkeley and Stanford. A photo of him shaking hands with a governor. He rose from behind his mahogany desk, his salt and pepper hair thinner than I remembered, but his eyes still steady as stone. "Jerome," he said warmly, gripping my hand. "You wouldn't call unless it was serious." I slid the papers across his desk, bank statements, airline confirmations, all with my accounts drained, yet my name missing. His brows furrowed as he scanned the documents. I leaned back, ashamed of what I was showing him, but also relieved that someone else was finally seeing what I saw. "They used my money," I said, voice low, "and cut me out of the very thing I paid for." Malcolm adjusted his glasses. "If they touched your accounts without your consent, that's fraud. And if there are forged authorizations, that's criminal." I felt a jolt in my chest. Fraud, criminal, words heavier than any accusation I had dared whisper to myself. He handed me back the airline receipts, then lifted the bank alerts again, his frown deepening. "This authorization form," he began, sliding one toward me. I bent closer. My name was scribbled in looping strokes, not my writing. My hand shook as I traced the forged signature. "They stole not just my money, Malcolm. They stole my dignity." His tone hardened. "We can act, but you'll need to be prepared for war. They won't fold easily." For a moment, the air felt thick. My daughter, my flesh and blood, had crossed a line I couldn't pretend was a misunderstanding. Betrayal like this didn't leave scars, it severed arteries. Malcolm leaned forward, calm but firm. "Don't reveal what you know. Not yet. Let them think you're still in the dark. The more rope they take, the easier it will be to pull it tight." I nodded slowly, the plan forming in my mind. For weeks I had been stumbling, reacting, drowning. Now, for the first time, I was holding a lifeline. A trap was being set, and I wasn't the prey anymore. When the meeting ended, I stepped into the hallway, my body lighter than it had felt in days. The weight wasn't gone, but I could breathe again. As I walked toward the glass doors, a familiar voice stopped me. Jerome? It was Ruth Demesh, Mitchell's mother, my in-law. She stood with her purse tucked under one arm, surprise flickering across her face. Her eyes darted to the folder in my hand, then back to me. I didn't mean to overhear, she said gently, but I caught enough. You're not imagining things. I froze. You've noticed, too? She lowered her voice. I've seen things. I know more than they think I do. And you don't have to fight this alone. Her words echoed in my ears as I stepped outside. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a man cornered. I felt like a man preparing for battle. The house had been quiet all afternoon, but quiet didn't bring me peace anymore. Every creak in the walls felt like doubt settling deeper inside me. I had just finished sorting the papers Malcolm asked me to keep safe when a knock startled me out of my chair. Earl Karras stood there, shifting on his feet like a boy caught stealing apples. His eyes darted past me, as if afraid to be seen at my door. I shouldn't even be here, he muttered, hat in his hands. But I figured you deserved to know. Folks are saying things about you. A knot tightened in my stomach. Earl cleared his throat and lowered his voice. Word is, you've been forgetful. That maybe you can't handle your own money anymore. Carla's been talking. The air left the room. My own daughter, to hear it secondhand, like gossip from the corner store, burned worse than any direct insult. I thanked Earl for his honesty, tried to smile as though it didn't pierce me. He patted my shoulder, avoiding my eyes, and left me standing in the doorway with shame burning across my face. I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The words echoed in my head. Too forgetful to handle his own money. Mitchell had said something similar the night I defied them. Now I knew it wasn't just a slip. It was their script. By the time I rose from the table, anger had settled under my ribs, hot and steady. If they wanted to paint me as weak, I would show them how wrong they were. That evening, I forced myself to church. Habit, maybe, or some need to feel steady ground under my feet. But instead of comfort, I walked straight into another blow. In the vestibule, I overheard two acquaintances whispering. Carla says he shouldn't be living alone anymore, one said. Her voice hushed but sharp enough to cut. She's worried about him, the other replied. Maybe it's time he let the kids handle things. My chest constricted. They spoke as if I wasn't even a man anymore, just a burden to be managed. I pressed my palms against the pew and willed myself not to collapse. Their words weren't just private family daggers now. They were out in the open, eroding what little dignity I still had in the community. Driving home, headlights streaked past me like accusations. My thoughts circled, bitter and unrelenting. They weren't just stealing my money, they were stealing my name. Every rumor chipped away at the man I had built over a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and fatherhood. For a moment, despair tempted me to retreat, to let them have their way, to fade into the background of my own life. But then Sylvie's face came to mind, her wide smile, the little drawing of the ocean she pressed into my hands, Jonas's laughter as he talked about surfing. No, I couldn't let them grow up thinking their grandfather was too feeble to stand up for himself. I had to hold the line, not for me alone, but for them to see what strength looked like, even when betrayed. I was turning that vow over in my heart when I noticed something at my doorstep. An envelope, slipped under the door while I'd been away. No return address. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, photocopied but clear enough. At the bottom, in bold ink, was my own signature, except it wasn't mine. The forged scrawl leapt off the page, mocking me. A legal document tying my name to an authorization I never gave. My pulse hammered. This wasn't just betrayal whispered in corners or smirks at the dinner table. This was theft in black and white. The war Carla had started was now written in ink, and it bore my stolen name. The house had never felt so heavy with silence. That paper with my forged signature sat on the table like a shadow that wouldn't leave. I hadn't slept properly in 2 nights. Every creak in the house sounding like accusation. every rustle of the wind like whispers of betrayal. Then the phone rang. Carla's voice was steady, almost rehearsed. "Dad, we're having a family meeting. It's important. You need to be there." A family meeting. I knew what that meant. They wanted to put me on trial in my own daughter's living room. My gut told me not to go, but something deeper, maybe pride, maybe sheer defiance, pushed me to face it. I put on my best jacket, the one with firm shoulders, and drove over with my hands gripping the wheel tighter than they should have. Carla's living room was staged like a courtroom. Mitchell sat beside her, rigid, his arm draped across the back of the chair as if to stake his claim. Ruth was there too, quietly seated near the edge, her eyes following everything. A couple of extended relatives were invited. I realized, an audience for the performance. Sylvie and Jonas had been sent upstairs. I could hear faint laughter from the children's room, a cruel reminder of innocence hidden away while the adults sharpened their knives. Carla opened with a tone dripping with false concern. "Dad, we've noticed things, little slips, memory lapses. We just want to make sure you're safe and everything is in order." Her voice trembled just enough to sound sincere, but her eyes glinted with calculation. The words stung. But more than that, they humiliated. They weren't talking about safety. They were laying the groundwork to strip me of my dignity. Mitchell leaned forward, a folder in his hand. He pulled out the document I had already seen, the one that made my stomach twist. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward me like evidence. "This shows you agreed to let Carla manage the accounts and the trip funds. It's for your own good." I stared at the paper, my name scrawled in ink I hadn't touched. My voice came out low but steady. "That is not my signature." The room fell into silence, the kind that buzzes in your ears. For the first time, I refused to play the confused old man they hoped I'd be. My denial cut through the script they had rehearsed. Then Ruth spoke. Her voice, usually so quiet, carried a clarity that made everyone turn. "I saw Carla and Mitchell with a notary weeks ago. Jerome wasn't there. They signed something, but it wasn't in his presence." Gasps and uneasy shuffling filled the room. Carla's face tightened, her polished smile faltering. Mitchell's jaw clenched. Ruth had pulled back the curtain just enough to let the light in. I seized the moment, my chest rising with conviction. "You tried to erase me from my own life, but I will not be silenced. Not by forged papers, not by whispered lies." Carla tried to recover, her voice trembling as she reached for control. "Ruth must have misunderstood. Dad, you're overreacting." But I didn't let her finish. I stood taller, steadier than I'd felt in weeks. "I've already spoken with my lawyer. Every move you've made is being recorded. If you think I'm going to fade quietly into the background, you're mistaken." The room froze. Carla's smile vanished completely. Mitchell's hand slammed against the table, the sound cracking through the air like a gunshot. His veins bulged as he glared at me, fury radiating from his silence. I didn't flinch. For the first time, they realized I wasn't their victim. I was their opponent. The morning after that tribunal at Carla's house, I sat in my living room, the silence pressing in like a weight on my chest. I could still see Mitchell's hand slamming on the table, veins bulging, his voice rising in anger. I could still hear Ruth's steady words, standing up for me when no one else dared. That memory gave me a flicker of strength, but it didn't soften the truth. The fracture in my family had widened into a chasm. The house felt hollow. I stared at the photos on the mantel, Carla as a girl with ice cream on her chin, Mitchell holding Jonas on his shoulders, Sylvie laughing on a carousel. All of it seemed like someone else's life. The echoes that filled these rooms weren't from their laughter anymore, but from the accusations that hung over me. Betrayal has a way of stripping the warmth from walls. My phone buzzed. Malcolm's name lit the screen. I hesitated before answering, a knot forming in my stomach. "Jerome," he said, his voice unusually tight. "I need you to brace yourself." The tone alone told me nothing good was coming. "Carla and Mitchell," he continued, "they've filed a petition with the court. They're claiming you're mentally incompetent. If this sticks, you'll lose control of your finances, your house, everything." The words hit like a hammer to the chest. A courtroom. This was no longer whispers or dinner table lies. This was my dignity dragged onto public record. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles turned white. "They want to bury me alive while I'm still breathing," I muttered. "Listen," Malcolm said gently. "We'll fight this, but it means war. You need to be ready." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. The betrayal no longer felt like something private. It was out there now, formal, stamped and filed. I thought back to those murmurs at church, the sideways glances, people wondering if I should still live alone. That had been groundwork, carefully laid. I hadn't seen it then. Now it was clear. They had been building a case against me long before I caught on. Humiliation burned, but beneath it, something harder was forming. They wanted to erase me on paper. I would carve the truth in stone. As dusk fell, I spread the forged documents and bank statements across the kitchen table. The paper glared under the overhead light, every false signature a wound. My phone vibrated again, this time with a text. "Grandpa, I know they're lying. I'll help you. But please don't tell Mom. Sylvie." The words blurred as my eyes filled. Pride and sorrow mingled in equal measure. My granddaughter, caught in the crossfire of her parents' schemes, still had the courage to reach for me. She was my anchor, my reminder that not everything in this family was poisoned. I typed back, "You're brave, sweetheart. I'll keep you safe." Then I set the phone beside the forged papers, looking at both, side by side. The contrast struck me. A stolen signature meant to erase me, and a granddaughter's message that kept me alive. "They think I'm weak," I whispered into the empty room. "They've forgotten who raised them." This fight was no longer about the money. It was about my name, my blood, the truth. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and paper, the kind of sterile scent that made a man feel small. Cold marble walls towered over me as I walked inside, cane tapping lightly on the floor. Mitchell stood near the benches, his smug grin cutting into me like a blade. Every step felt like I was walking into a cage where my dignity itself was on trial. My chest tightened, but I straightened my back. I wasn't here to crumble. Carla was already seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap, lips curved into a polished smile for the judge. She looked like the perfect daughter, a concerned caretaker ready to protect her aging father. To the strangers in this room, she was believable. To me, she was a stranger. The judge called order, and the trial began. Carla rose first, her voice soft, almost tender. She spoke of my supposed forgetfulness, how I often misplaced bills and repeated stories without realizing it. Each word stung. She wrapped her lies in sugar, feigned worry dripping from her tone. "We love him, Your Honor, but we're concerned he can't handle his finances anymore." Mitchell leaned forward, adding his part with rehearsed sincerity. "He's vulnerable. We only want what's best for him. The trip funds showed us how easily things can get mismanaged." I clenched my fists under the table. Heat surged through me, a pulse of outrage so strong I nearly shouted. But Malcolm had told me, silence can be stronger than rage. So I sat still, staring at the polished oak desk, waiting for my turn. When Malcolm stood, the rhythm of the room changed. His voice carried calm authority, each word sharp as glass. He began by questioning Mitchell, pressing him on the details of the supposed financial missteps. Mitchell stumbled, hesitated, contradicted himself. Then Malcolm reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sheet of paper. The color drained from Carla's face. It was the medical document they had submitted, a report claiming I was unfit. "Your Honor," Malcolm said, holding it high, "this document is not authentic. The signature of the physician does not match. Furthermore, this report references tests that never occurred." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Ruth, seated quietly behind me, covered her mouth. My throat tightened, not from fear this time, but from vindication. The judge demanded explanation, but Carla's polished smile wavered. She tried to mask her panic. Mitchell shifted in his seat, attempting objections that landed hollow. Malcolm struck again, presenting a second document, one that made my heart thump with pride. Here is the official clearance from Dr. Alvarez, who has treated Mr. Skakel for years. It confirms his mental competence in detail. The courtroom shifted like a tide turning, the forged report versus the real clearance. For the first time in weeks, I felt my voice wasn't just trapped in my chest. It was standing tall in ink and testimony. Carla's eyes darted toward Mitchell, his jaw tightened, fists clenching. The judge called a recess. As murmurs filled the room, I rose slowly, my legs heavy but steady. I caught sight of Carla leaning close to Mitchell, whispering furiously. One word slipped past their clenched teeth. Plan B. The air grew heavier around me. Vindication should have felt like victory, but instead it felt like a temporary reprieve, the calm before something darker. If this was their defeat, then I knew something darker was waiting just ahead. The house was silent, but not in the comforting way I remembered from years ago when my wife was still alive. Back then, silence meant peace. Her humming in the kitchen, the rustle of her turning a page in the living room, the quiet knowledge that we were together. Now silence was emptiness, pressing in from every wall, a reminder of what had been lost and what betrayal had left behind. The courtroom victory felt hollow. Yes, I had proven I wasn't incompetent, but at what cost? My family was fractured, my daughter's face etched in bitterness, and my grandchildren caught in the crossfire. I sat in my chair with the television on mute, the flicker of light casting shadows across the room. The echo of Mitchell's fist slamming the table during the tribunal still rang in my ears. That sound had split something in me, not fear, but recognition that the family I thought I knew no longer existed. My late wife would have been the bridge, the voice of reason. Without her, it felt as though the house itself had crumbled, and I was left to sift through the rubble alone. The following Sunday, I forced myself to attend church. I almost turned the car around twice, fearing the same whispers I'd heard before, the sideways glances that had once made me shrink inside myself. But when I stepped inside, the air felt different. People met my eyes. Some smiled, others clasped my hand, and one elderly woman simply said, "I knew the truth would come out." Their sympathy carried a weight of its own, lighter than suspicion, but heavy with pity. Ruth approached after the service, her steps firm, her voice quiet but resolute. "They can't silence the truth anymore. Jerome," she said. Her words steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt the shift in perception, not just in the court, but in the eyes of those around us. The community no longer saw me as fragile or senile. They saw a man wronged, a man still standing. That evening, as I sat in my living room, a knock rattled softly at the back door. When I opened it, Sylvie stood there, her little shoulders hunched, eyes darting around like she feared being followed. She stepped inside quickly, clutching her backpack. "Grandpa," she whispered, "my friends ask why Mommy and Daddy hate you." Her voice cracked. "I don't know what to tell them." I bent down, placing my hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry their choices, sweetheart. None of this is your fault." She blinked up at me, and for a moment, her eyes reminded me of her grandmother's, steady, kind, searching for answers. I promised her, silently and out loud, that I would protect her from the shame her parents tried to create. That bond, unspoken but unbreakable, became my new anchor, more solid than the money, the court, or even the community's shifting judgment. Meanwhile, word spread, Carla's mask was slipping, and Mitchell's anger only grew. I heard from neighbors that he had barked at a cousin in the grocery store, veins bulging, his voice cracking with fury. Relatives stopped visiting their home. The whispers of fraud and deceit began circling, and the same community they had tried to turn against me now turned away from them. Justice, I realized, doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it looks like silence, friends no longer calling, relatives no longer standing by. Shame is a punishment all its own. Still, the weight on my chest remained. One night, unable to sleep, I opened the leather journal I'd used for years to jot down memories, small notes, or thoughts I never said aloud. The pages had seen grief, joy, love, and now, betrayal. I wrote slowly, each word like a stone pressed onto paper. I wonder if forgiveness is strength, or just surrender. The question sat there, staring back at me like an accusation. Could I ever forgive Carla? Could I let go without feeling like I had lost the last shred of my dignity? My hand trembled as I closed the book, pressing the leather cover shut as though it could hold the turmoil inside. I closed the book, but the question remained open, and tomorrow demanded an answer. The envelope from Malcolm felt heavier than paper should. Sitting at my kitchen table, morning sun cutting across the wood grain, I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was the proof of Carla's Plan B. She had filed forged authorization papers to liquidate part of my property. My property, the house I built with my late wife, the one place where every birthday, every Christmas, every scraped knee had found comfort. For a moment, the rage threatened to consume me. Betrayal had gone from exclusion to outright erasure. They weren't just trying to leave me behind on a vacation anymore. They wanted to wipe away my very existence, my legacy, brick by brick. I folded the papers slowly, like one handles broken glass, and whispered, "Enough." 1 week later, I walked into the courthouse. The cold marble walls loomed above me, the sound of footsteps echoing with finality. Mitchell's smirk greeted me across the room, while Carla tried for a fragile smile that never reached her eyes. I felt fear in my bones. Yes, but also something steadier, dignity. If they wanted a reckoning, they would have it. Carla testified first. Her voice trembled with practiced fragility, painting me as forgetful, too frail to manage my own affairs. Mitchell added his feigned concern, rehearsed lines dripping with false compassion. The judge listened, stone-faced, while I clenched my fists beneath the table, willing myself not to shout. Then Malcolm rose. He spoke with the calm assurance of a man carrying the truth in his pocket. One by one, he laid out their so-called evidence, exposing dates that didn't align, signatures that stuttered under magnification. "Forgery," he said simply, his voice echoing across the chamber. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Even Ruth gasped when the forged medical report appeared under the harsh courtroom lights. Ruth took the stand next. Her voice was quiet but unwavering as she told the judge she had seen Carla and Mitchell meeting with a notary weeks ago, without me present. The air shifted. Carla's mask cracked. Mitchell's jaw tightened as though it might splinter. I sat still, every nerve alive, watching the fortress of lies crumble brick by brick. The judge leaned forward, eyes hard. His verdict was swift and merciless. Carla and Mitchell were guilty of fraud. They were stripped of any claim to my estate, ordered to make restitution, and warned of further charges if they pursued similar schemes. Mitchell's reputation as a respectable man collapsed in that instant. Carla's sobs echoed through the chamber as relatives turned away from her in shame. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Sylvie stood, my granddaughter, barely tall enough to be seen over the polished wooden rail, raised her chin and spoke. Her voice trembled, but her words struck like steel. "Grandpa is the kindest man I know. He never forgot me. He never forgot any of us. I can't stand by while my parents lie about him." Silence fell. The gallery shifted. A collective intake of breath. My throat tightened. Eyes wet, as pride and sorrow mingled. My anchor of hope had chosen her side. Not in whispers this time, but in front of the world. She had given me back something Carla could never steal. My name, spoken with love. When the gavel struck, it was more than a legal sound. It was the breaking of chains. Outside. I walked down the courthouse steps. The air felt lighter, the sky a sharper blue than I'd seen in years. Strangers looked at me with respect, not pity. Ruth touched my arm gently and whispered, "It's over, Jerome." But I knew it wasn't over. Not truly. Some wounds don't heal. They scar. I thought of my late wife. She would have mourned the fracture of our family. But I knew she would also have told me this. Dignity is worth defending, even if it costs peace. That night, back home, I sat with Sylvie's drawing of the ocean on my lap. The paper had grown worn from being folded and unfolded, but its colors were still bright. I realized they had tried to erase me with lies. But in the end, they erased themselves. Forgiveness crossed my mind like a shadow. Forgive myself for trusting too blindly. Yes, but not them. Some betrayals cut too deep. And forgiveness, in those cases, is not strength, it's surrender. I closed my eyes, breathing steady. My dignity was never theirs to take, I whispered into the quiet room, and that truth will outlive us all. My friends, if you've stayed with me through this story, I want to leave you with one truth. Silence is not weakness. Too many of us, as we grow older, believe we should stay quiet to keep the peace. But peace built on lies and betrayal is no peace at all. If your children, your in-laws, or even your community try to take away your dignity, your voice, or your rights, you must stand, not just for yourself, but for the generations who watch you, who will remember whether you fought or gave in. I lost parts of my family in this battle, but I found my strength, and I found love in the eyes of those who still chose truth over greed. So please, protect your name, protect your legacy. You've earned it. And remember, your dignity was never theirs to take.